So for my application problem, I decided to work out problem 105, and the problem reads: use the information in exercises 101 and 103 to determine the rate at which Summertime Fabrics average profit per jacket is changing when 400 jackets have been produced and sold. So in order to find profit, you need to do revenue minus cost. And in 101 and 103 it talks about what the revenue function and what the cost function is. And so starting in problem 101, it says it asks, or it gives you the cost function, and in order to find the average of that cost function, which is 950 plus 15 times square root of x, you would need to divide that by x, or the number of jackets that you produce. And so in order to get the average cost per jacket, and then in order to get the rate at which the cost for each jacket is changing once you produce a certain amount of jackets, you would take the derivative of the average cost function, and in order to do that you would use the difference quotient, which is a prime b minus b prime a divided by b squared. And if you do that for the average cost function, you get 15 over 2 times x raised to the negative 1/2 power times x minus 1 times 950 plus 15 times the square root of x, all divided by x squared. So next, in order to solve this problem, you needed to look at question 103, which gives you the revenue function. It shows how much money you've made after you've produced a certain amount of items. And if you look at it, it's the revenue function is 85 times the square root of x. And in order to find the average revenue, because we're looking for the average profit, and so you'd also need the average revenue, you would divide the revenue function by x, or by how much profit, or how many items you've produced. And then in order to get the rate at which your average revenue is changing, you would take the derivative of the average revenue function, and in order to do that you would use a prime b minus b prime a all over b squared. And if you do that, you get 85 over 2 times x raised to the negative 1/2 power times x minus 1 times 85 times the square root of x all over x squared. So now that we've looked at questions 101 and 103, we can look at 105 and find out how fast the average profit is changing per item produced at this Summertime Fabrics company. So profit is revenue minus cost, and so you could also take the average revenue minus the average cost and still get the average profit. And in order to get the rate at which the average profit is changing, you would need to subtract the average cost, the rate of the average cost minus the rate of the average revenue. And as you can see here, the question is asking for how fast would the average profit be changing once 400 jackets have been produced. So what you would do is you would insert 400 into wherever you saw x for the derivative of the average cost and the average revenue functions. And so that's what I did there. So once you do that, you end up with negative 0.0053 minus negative 0.006875, which both represent respectively the rate at which the average revenue and the average cost is changing after 400 items have been produced. And if you subtract those, you get the rate at which the average profit is changing, and it comes out to be barely anything, not even a cent per jacket. And that means that this Summertime Fabrics company, once they've produced 400 items, their profit will be increasing barely. It'll not even be increasing by a cent for every jacket that they produce. And so an application of this problem where it might be seen in everyday life is if a company wants to project whether or not they will be successful after a certain amount of time and after they've produced a certain amount of products or items, they can use this and take their the cost of producing a certain amount of items and the average of that, and they can subtract that from the average revenue, and they can get the average profit. And using that, they can also find the rate at which the average profit is changing after they've produced a certain amount of items. So someone that might use this application would be any kind of business owner that wants to project how successful their business will be after a certain amount of time, or after they've produced a certain amount of items. That could include a pizza shop owner, a sports store, a bicycle store, any kind of business that sells items. And I chose this problem because I enjoy problems where you are finding the rate at which the profit is changing after a certain amount of time, or a certain amount of items have been produced. I think it's cool how you can kind of predict the future with that and see what's going to be changing.